What if I told you the retirement boom we keep hearing about isn't quite what it seems? Fidelity just analyzed 17.8 million investor accounts in one of the biggest retirement studies ever. I'll be honest, even as a financial planner, some of the findings got me. I broke it down into 5 different areas that surprised me, like why record balances might be giving us a false sense of security, and how to actually measure if you're on track for financial independence so you can make the best financial decisions for your life. This data is from Fidelity's Q2 2025 retirement analysis, which I'll link in the description below. So let's get into it. We'll start with the big headline. Retirement account balances hit record highs in 2025. According to Fidelity's Q2 analysis, the average 401k reached about $137,800, which is up 8% from last year. IRAs hit $131,000, up 5% from last year, and 403Bs were around $125,000, which is up 9% year over year. All record levels. That's a big rebound from earlier this year when the market dipped. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ are up about 11% and 18% over Q2 respectively, which helped bump those values back up. To show you what consistent contributions can do, over the last decade, those 401k balances are up 51%, IRAs 40%, and 403Bs 69%. Maybe you're thinking 130,000 sounds solid. We're back in record territory, people are saving, but those averages don't tell the full story, given that most Americans are still behind on what they'll actually need. It's like if you looked at the average income of an American based on the entire population. The 1% are going to skew the numbers a bit. Using Fidelity's own rule of thumb, by retirement age, you should have about 10x your salary saved. For someone earning 80K, that's roughly $800,000. So when we celebrate an average balance of 130,000, it's progress, but it's a far cry from retiring to the keys. And because those averages include super savers with million-dollar accounts, the typical saver is far below that number in reality. Speaking of the super savers, another part that surprised me was that the number of 401k millionaires hit an all-time high. At the end of Q2, Fidelity reported 595,000 people with at least $1 million in their 401k, and another 501,000 IRA millionaires. That's a 16% jump in just 3 months, which means we have about 83,000 newly minted 401k millionaires. And if one of those happens to be you watching, congratulations. But before we all assume everyone's rich, Fidelity manages about 24 million 401k accounts, which really means only about 2% are millionaires. So for every new member of the 2 Comma Club, there's about 4 million others still working toward it. It got me wondering though, what's driving that surge? And great to see that part was not surprising. It's the boring stuff, like consistent saving plus employer matches, staying invested through market swings, and letting it all compound. I dare to say none of these millionaires are stock picking geniuses, at least not in the 401k. They just kept contributing for 20, 30, even 40 years. And side note, if you've been contributing to your 401k for 40 years or more, please brag about it down in the comments because that's awesome. That news is really relieving to me to hear again and again, though, that there's no fancy formula that you're missing out on. It truly is time and consistency that win out and build wealth. Now, for my self-employed viewers, if your income isn't steady like a W-2 job, you can still apply those same principles, like automate your SEP IRA or solo 401k contributions, even if it's a smaller percentage when your income fluctuates. It's not about one big year, it's about building momentum over decades. Which brings me to surprise number 3, because the reason this millionaire boom even happened is that people are saving smarter than ever. That's right, even with inflation, higher costs, and all the noise in the economy, Americans are saving more than ever before. In 2025, the total average 401k savings rate, which is both your contribution plus your employer match, hit 14.2% of income, the highest ever recorded. And it's not just younger savers doing the heavy lifting. Baby boomers increased their IRA contributions 37% year over year, and Gen X boosted theirs by 25%. There are even more interesting generational comparisons in surprise number 5, too, so hang around till then. Even during the rough first quarter of this year, when the market dipped, 17% of people actually increased their contributions while only 5% lowered them. Pat on the back, everyone. Well done. That discipline to keep adding in when the market's down is what separates long-term, consistent investors from emotional speculators. It shows me, too, that maybe people are actually learning from what the market taught us between 2020 and 2022. A lot of employers are also auto-enrolling people at higher default percentages. Just anecdotally, I've seen 6% or even 8% instead of the old 3%. Self-employed folks can do this too. This is especially where automation helps reduce that friction and take the money before you ever see it. And that's the trick right there. Make the good decision once, automate it, and just let it run. You could call it the set it and forget it superpower. Most people don't fail because they don't care. They fail because they have to choose every month. Automation removes that choice because we all know that the extra 1 or 2 clicks makes a huge difference. But even with all this discipline, one of Fidelity's most surprising findings had nothing to do with savings at all. It's all about behavior under pressure. Even during a volatile market with fears of a recession and uncertainty with tariffs, most investors did nothing. And once again, that turned out to be the right move. Fidelity's data showed that only 5.5% of people changed their investment allocation this past quarter. Think about that one. 94% of investors literally did nothing while headlines just screamed recession. When the market rebounded, those who stayed invested were the ones who benefited the most. Like the market lesson I mentioned from 2020, same story. Those who stayed invested doubled within 5 years. Take it back to 2008, same story. This is classic emotional investing. If you panic and sell during a dip, you double screw yourself. You lock in those losses and miss the rebound. Q2 2025 was a textbook example of all of this. And once again, the lesson is patience pays. Sometimes the best action is just no action at all. Every chance you can take to build discipline now, whether that's in your retirement accounts or your business, that builds your resilience to volatility and stops you being emotional about stocks. So after all this optimism, rising balances, steady savers, calm investors, you'd think everyone's winning the retirement game, right? Not quite. All the juicy headlines and statistics are great, but here's the part of Fidelity's study that gets buried, and it's possibly the most important of all. Even with record highs, there are still huge gaps in who's actually benefiting. And you might be here. Let's break the average balances down across generations. Baby boomers currently average about $256,000. Gen X is closer to $150,000. And millennials are around half that at $75K. And Gen Z is still just getting started at roughly $15K. The gender gap is just as clear. The median IRA balances for women are only about 63% of men's. And you guessed it, racial disparities just keep getting wider too, with Black and Hispanic families having half or less the retirement savings of white households. Even worse, when you zoom out from any demographic at all, just in general, 41% of Americans have no retirement savings at all. So while the averages look great, there are still millions of people left out from those stats. That gap isn't just numbers on a screen. It's tens of millions of people who will rely entirely on Social Security. It's the difference between choosing when to retire and being told when you have to. And the gap between those doing well and those just trying to get started is getting bigger. But it's not too late. The data also showed that boomers increased savings more than any other group this year, making real use of those catch-up contributions. Wherever you fall on that spectrum, though, you can still change where you're headed. And I've said it once, I'll say it again, with consistent, intentional saving. So what can we actually do about it? Fidelity's data gives us one final clue, and it's one that most people overlook. Even among those who are saving, most people aren't hitting the recommended benchmarks. Half of Americans have less than $200K saved. The median retirement savings for households nearing retirement between ages 55 to 64 is only about $185,000. For people aged 65 to 74, it's $200,000. That means half of Americans entering retirement have enough to cover just a few years of expenses. But the other half shows it can be done. Fidelity's data shows older savers ramping up contributions in record numbers this year, which I think is proof that small changes compound faster than most people realize. Whenever I see numbers like this, I think back to folks I know who started late but still made it work. That's the kind of flexibility this data is really about. Not just retiring, but choosing how you live. So overall, Fidelity's study tells two different stories. Do you want the good news or the bad news first? Well, the good news is retirement balances are stronger than ever. Investors are saving more, staying disciplined, and avoiding the panic moves. But the bad news, or better said, the warning that it shows, is something we all kind of know. Averages don't tell the full story. A lot of people are still struggling, and the gaps when you chop it up by demographics are real. But like the lessons above show us, the best investors aren't the ones who chase the market, they're the ones who stay consistent. So whether you're getting ready to retire or you're still grinding in your career or business, remember, it's not about hitting some magic number. It's about building steady financial habits that get you closer to freedom every year. Now, if you want to see how close you are to your own financial independence number, I've linked a free tool from my financial planning software below where you can easily run your own retirement projection for free. If you found this helpful, thumbs up, and please consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.